Hello there, so I just recently passed the 50 ranked maps milestone. I'm no Andrea, but I'd still consider this a pretty big achievement, and the hardest step towards reaching it was undeniably getting my first ranked map. The vast majority of new mappers get stuck and quit before that point. Ranking your first map is the tallest hurdle to jump as a mapper, and there's no surefire way to succeed. To help anyone out in that situation, I could rant on about the theoretically safest ways to get your first ranked map, but I honestly don't think that would be too fun for either of us. Instead, it may be more interesting to talk about something simple. In this video, I'm going to share my own experiences with that hurdle, starting from literally my first objects placed in the editor, up through the achievement of my first map reaching rank. Times have changed, so it won't be exactly what mappers today go through, but you might learn from, or at least relate to my mistakes. My first map. A masterpiece, right? According to file modification dates, I mapped this less than 2 weeks after I joined OSU, and it naturally reflects my lack of knowledge. I had absolutely no concept of how objects would be arranged. Spacing logic was thrown out the window, and I didn't know what was reasonable for gameplay. 1/4 sliders here, hey, why not? And why not long sliders next? Variety is cool, especially in slider shapes. Just spam nodes everywhere. Then near the end, I discovered the 1/16th beat snap divisor. So much fun. While I didn't know what I was doing at all, my map did have a minute amount of thought behind it. I didn't play with effects volume enabled because I was new, I don't know, and so I didn't consider slider ends important. Sliders were just hold devices, leading me to not care about where sliders were extended to. Rhythmically, I followed exclusively vocals, which is alright, though not paying attention to other layers of the music at all makes for a pretty bland experience. And for these last long sliders for each combo, I opted for a sharp movement near the end because I felt they would be more climactic. So my map makes it obvious. Like most new mappers, I thought I made something cool and there was some thought behind it, but I didn't understand what made a map even half decent, and that was okay by me. I only made this map because a friend of mine who also just began playing OSU was interested in the editor. For a long while, he was far more into mapping than I was, his only goal being to show me his cute maps. At the most basic level, he was the one who taught me how to map. Our mapping motivations made themselves pretty clear when I began my real first map 3 months later though. While he was satisfied with arbitrarily making maps and forgetting about them the next day, I found that to be pointless. I needed a solid reason to create a map, and once I learned that the ranking process, well, existed and ranked maps received lots of attention, I decided on my goal. I would make a map set for rank. My mapping ability hadn't improved in that time, of course. What you're seeing here is nearly my first draft of the map, which looks scarily similar to that first map we broke down. I once again mapped without effects volume, so slider rhythms were mapped without thought. Slider shapes somehow managed to be even worse than before because I tried following an outdated guide, and I overmapped lots of 1/8 triples because I thought that would be more fun. And like, what even is this? I can't tell if I was even listening to the music. Back then though, I thought all this was genius. For my low difficulties, a requirement for ranking, I practically copied one of my favorite map sets, Gold Dust. And by copied, I mean I stole the difficulty settings and tried to replicate generally similar rhythm and spacing. My original low difficulties have long since been deleted, but you can just imagine that they vaguely serve their purposes while being overall terrible. The only good difficulty on the set was the one made not by me. I asked that previously mentioned friend of mine to make a difficulty, and its organization was exactly what my mapping lacked. The diff was designed fully through copying and pasting objects, whereas mine were all freeform. The alternative word for not thinking about it. With the full map set done, I uploaded it and was immediately faced with a concern. There was more to ranking a map. I mean, I read the ranking criteria and made sure my map fit within its rules, so I thought someone would come along and just say, yep, congrats, you did it. Some later research on the wiki led me to discover that ranking a map actually takes more than making a rankable, emphasis on the quotes, map. That research also showed me to the modding queues, where my luck at finding mods was much better than I deserved. You see, I hadn't used the forums before, my post history proves it, and I ended up linking my map in the first modding queue I saw, which just happened to be prioritizing new mappers. If I hadn't received this mod, it's very possible I would have thought getting mods was impossible and I would have given up. Side note, looking at your first ever forum posts is true pain. It's like nobody knows how to act on the forum at first, so they type awkwardly and use built-in emotes unironically. This face makes me uncomfortable. Looking at the past, I also was led to my first mod though. Not the first one I received, the first one I made. Without experience, I tried out a mod for mod exchange, resulting in what could barely be called a contribution. Modding with zero experience feels shameful because you can't actually help, but I forced myself to try it out anyway because I didn't know what else to do. My post was again awkward and emote-filled, pointing out non-issues due to a lack of knowledge. At the time, I even manually wrote out timestamps instead of copying and pasting them. That's how little I knew. My last point may have made some sense though. Stacking in the editor wasn't a feature yet, so I didn't realize these were stacked, and I asked the mapper to spread them up because of that. Apparently I've been frustrated by this since literally the day I started modding. Enable stacks, please. As for my own map, I gradually posted more and more in mod queues and improved in minor ways. Just minor, because major changes were hard for me to accept. I felt like my map was something unique, and changing it drastically to fit modder interests was going to ruin it. It also really annoyed me personally that everyone compared my insane difficulty to my friends, saying his was leagues better, which I of course disagreed with. Thanks to a few experienced modders, I continued to learn more about the process. The fourth mod here told me I needed to reply to mods with what I changed, and some other experienced modders down the line convinced me I needed to remap. Remapping isn't an easy concept to come to terms with. Deleting all your hard work and starting from scratch feels like a retrograde, yet I can't name any time that, for me personally, it hasn't been an improvement. To remap something effectively, you need to understand your own mistakes. Not just small ones though, map-wide mistakes. On my normal difficulty, for example, I was told to reform rhythm entirely because it was too difficult for its target audience. Mappers at my level here need to remap most often to account for essential mapping concepts they're taught after creating a map full of problems. But new mappers aren't the only ones who should remap though. I do it even now sometimes, such as on this map. Originally, it separated different musical sections into different quadrants of the screen, but after sitting on it for a while, I decided object placements were too crowded and the quadrants I used weren't very indicative of the map's up and down intensity shifts. The original would be rankable, but nowadays making something rankable isn't really a goal of mine. I'd rather make something I personally consider good, which my remap focusing on different halves of the screen served to achieve. And this isn't the only instance of this. Complacency will ruin your mapping, which is why remapping or simply moving on are essential to one's progress as a mapper. That first one I was obstinately okay with, but the second not so much. I couldn't just let go of my one map set and try ranking something else. I put so much time and so much effort into it that giving up would feel like a huge waste. And in hindsight, that was definitely the wrong course of action. After remapping multiple times, I felt like my map must have been ready. I continued asking for mods and denied people who thought my map had any big problems. Doing mod for mod at the time with me was hostile. I took criticism way too personally and threw my angst into my own mods. Finding nominators was also turning out fruitless. I posted in all the BN modding queues and sent everyone else private messages, earning me no responses. I continued getting mods since I thought more star priority would increase my chances of getting nominations. It didn't. My map sucked, and I gave up 4 months after the initial upload. My biggest mistake in the time was definitely not giving up sooner. When I could have been mapping and actually getting good at it, all I did was collect mods. My goal after quitting hadn't changed though. I still wanted to rank a map, and so I started on a new, even more ambitious project. I didn't like low difficulties, so I chose to map a marathon. Not a 5-minute one, I mapped a 15-minute long song. I must have been delusional. If I saw a new mapper doing that now, I'd tell them to give up immediately. A 15-minute map will have more mistakes than a shorter song and will be completely unreasonable to remap multiple times. Despite everything that happened though, myself of the past thought he was a mapping expert, a misunderstood mapping expert. While mapping this, I imagined asking for mods and responses being, "Wow, pishifat, there's nothing to mod here. This map is perfect." I pictured myself getting this ranked effortlessly, especially now with 4 months of experience understanding what modders preferred. The map was better than my previous, yet it was still nowhere close to rankable. After I got 1 mod, I gave up. The modder actually had something to criticize, and that didn't fit my picture-perfect ideal. My delusions only got worse with my next map, which I actually shouldn't need to detail. I've done that already in another video, but for the sake of chronology here, I'll at least summarize it. I was inspired by Landwings' Rose to map a song with overly complex timing, and the song I chose lacked enough rhythm variation to allow an inexperienced mapper like me to create a rankable product. I wasted days working needlessly, and after receiving a few mods, gave up. Gave up and moved on to what is now my first ranked map. A short and simple song this time with only 3 difficulties, allowing for easy adjustments, remapping, and eventual ranking. Sadly, I don't have a copy of the original map, but I can tell you for sure that it was quite different from what you're seeing here. Organization was just as bad as my previous maps, but through getting mods from a lot of different users, including a couple nominators, it changed face completely. Well, I say it's from mods, and it partially is, but I think it's more so from learning about mapping in other ways. Around the time I created this map, I actually began communicating with mappers and understood that my unfounded opinions on map design weren't the pinnacle of mapping as my past self thought they were. This could easily be misunderstood. I didn't actually go around and ask the best mappers in the world what they thought about my subpar excuse for a map. I was more realistic about it. By doing mod for mod exchanges with people around, or just a step above my mapping skill level at the time, I got to learn more about proper mapping perspectives, and it's cool to see that a lot of those mappers turned out to be big names in mapping today. Even with their help though, I feel like the way my map got ranked wasn't fair. It was like a cop-out. I'd been asking for mods and nominations for so long, then one day in August, the mapping world was flipped on its head. About 30 new nominators were added at once, some of which had already modded my map. I asked them if they'd be willing to push the map forward, and almost without any effort, my map got ranked by the start of September. It's like I barely had any control over my map getting ranked. The system being changed was all that did it. I can't imagine what would have happened if the bat split occurred when I was making that previous map. Would it have gotten ranked? Would my mapping have been terrible all around? Nobody can say, and this was a weird situation. Either way though, I did improve over the time I'd been mapping, and I was able to create something I want to say I was proud of it, but I wasn't. Ask any mapper and they'll tell you they hated their first ranked map after a few months. As you learn more, you recognize what you did wrong, so it makes perfect sense. But also, what I disliked about my map was just that it didn't really seem like my own creation. I took in so many opinions and changed so much about the map that it was like someone else practically made it, which is why it's organized so much differently than any of my ranked maps after that. Looking at it now though, I can't say it was that bad. I like it more than my next few ranked maps because it simply made more sense. Back then, I didn't really value organization, as should have been clear by my dislike of my friend's guess difficulty, but now it's something I find crucial for map design, and I understand why people back then thought my friend's insane difficulty was good and mine not so much. So yeah, that was essentially my first year of mapping on Osu. You may suck at mapping, but I can assure you, I sucked even more, simply because I refused to accept it. I made tons of bad choices and never learned how to improve until I stopped mapping in my own bubble and started talking to other mappers. And then I went on to rank 50 more maps and a bunch of other stuff. No real point besides that. I just wanted to share my experiences and hopefully let you go down a much more efficient path for your first ranked map. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you next week.